What is up, Scream team? Zach Cherry here, and in this video I am going to be reacting to my Scream 7 predictions. This has become somewhat of a tradition. I had done it for Screams 5 and 6, and while I think I got quite a few right with those two, I'm not too sure about this one. It's been a while since I made this video, so, you know, it'll be interesting to see if any of my theories and speculations did come to fruition. Having said that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel to get even more Scream-related content, but without any further ado, let's check out these predictions. Let's just get the obvious out of the way. I think that Sidney is going to survive. They could throw a curveball at us and kill her off, but at this point in the franchise, just even bringing her back, like, it would just be such a slap in the face to the fandom to decide this is the one where we're going to kill her off, especially with how upset people were that she wasn't in 6. This one was pretty much a given. I feel that in the past, like, Neve Campbell has said that she would never allow the character to get killed off, but to be fair, I think that most of the movies have felt like that. 3 might have been the exception of the only time I ever thought that there was a chance that she could be taken out. But when I think of this one, it basically just feels like a freebie, because there's no way that Sidney was not going to survive. Now, will Gale survive or will she die? This is the quandary that I have. Right now, my gut is telling me that she's going to survive. The reason for this is because they already killed off Dewey in 5, and that was a huge upset for a lot of the fan base, and it seems like they're even have regretted that since making that decision. We also had her come to a very near-death experience in Scream 6, so it just feels like it would be kind of redundant to have that happen again for a third time. So as easy as it is, I feel that the main characters, or just like at least these legacy characters of Sidney and Gale, are probably going to live because of just fan outrage. Everything with Gale more or less played out how I thought it would. This is probably like the least involved Gale has been in the action of any of these movies, just in terms of coming into contact with Ghostface, because like they were pretty safe with Gale. Somewhere in the marketing, like right before the movie came out, a part of me was a little speculative of maybe there was a chance Gale could be the killer, mostly for the fact that Gale in the interviews with Sidney said the same thing as Ghostface did to Sidney over the phone. So it was just interesting that I did say that there was no chance that Gale could be the killer, and then here I am weeks away from the premiere of the movie second guessing myself. But I mean, of course, like, Gale's never going to be the killer. They do not make returning characters the killer. It's just like, I would be surprised if something like that was to ever happen, especially at this point. But there was a sliver of me. I was just, you know what, I thought that maybe it would be interesting if Gale turned out to be the killer. Not necessarily good, but just interesting. So that doesn't necessarily apply to Chad and Mindy here, who I don't think are going to be as safe. I'm actually a little like confused about where they're going to fit in with this movie, because they don't really know Sidney all that well. I mean, like, they didn't share any scenes with her in Scream 5. You know, like, really, Gale is the only one that they've interacted with out of the cast here, and even then, I feel like that connection is very tenuous. That's not to say that it's not something that can be built on, but maybe their storyline is somehow connected to Gale, or they could be the opening scene murder. I would lean more towards having more to do with Gale and actually being in the full movie proper. I think that one of them will die, and I'm gonna say Mindy. The reason for this is twofold. One is that, you know, she's kind of echoing Randy, and if there's anything that we've seen with at least 5 and 6 is that they really like to go back and homage things in a way where, you know, history repeats itself. The other reason is that I feel like her injuries in the past have not been as severe as Chad's, that I feel like Chad will probably survive because I could just see him having an easier time this time around, just based on the fact that he got stabbed like 7 million times and survived in 6 alone. So I think that they're going to give him a break, and I can't see all 4 of these guys surviving. 6 played it really safe. We had 7 survivors altogether, so there's got to be casualties, especially with how big this cast is. How many people survived in Scream 7? I just got to run through the numbers. So we had Sidney, Gale, Tatum, Chad, Mindy, Mark, so that's 6 characters. I mean, I guess there was like other characters like Robbie who never came into any danger, so that could be 7, and there's the deputies as well. I mean, I guess this is still like kind of the same amount of survivors that we've had over the last 2 movies, so nothing really changed in that department. But obviously I wasn't fully correct about my predictions with these two. I was right in the sense that they were probably going to build off of some sort of relationship with Gale, or they were going to be connected to her. Interestingly, Ghostface did not inflict any harm on Chad other than like removing the knife from him. That was all Chloe, so maybe Mindy did kind of get it worse from the killer here, but yeah, they both survived, and you know, it is what it is. Now, this is where things get a little interesting because we have 3 returning characters who are all canonically deceased, and that is Dewey, Stu, and Roman. Now, what I'm going to just lump all these guys into is non-canon. What that means is, like, there's several things. It could be that these are all part of dream sequences or flashbacks. The franchise has never really gone that route other than Maureen in Scream 3, so I don't necessarily think that that's going to be a thing that's happening here. At least I can't see Sidney suddenly like having nightmares about Roman or Stu, and I think that like anything with Dewey would probably be more relegated to Gale. But what I am kind of leaning towards, and this has been a popular theory, that the killer or killers in this movie are going to be very AI centric or focused, meaning that whatever their motive is or something is going to have to do with AI in the movies. And part of that scheme is going to be that they're creating AI videos of these former characters who are dead. So we're going to be seeing Roman, Stu, and Dewey come back in a way that is not actually canon with what's going on, but just more so these AI effects that are somehow going to be creepy and haunt the surviving characters right now. All right. You know, I don't want to take like too much credit for getting this right because this was a very popular theory. I guess it just goes to show that they were running out of ideas. The only thing that I really didn't get right here is the fact that I thought Dewey's inclusion would be more so connected to Gale, and that she was going to get these phone calls or video calls from AI Dewey, which I think is a missed opportunity. Apparently there was a scene that was filmed that was supposed to be more of like an end credits sort of button with Stu showing up and being revealed to still be alive, and I guess it was scrapped for one reason or another. But yeah, I mean, it's just so obvious that these characters were all dead. We saw them die on screen in the previous movies, so I mean, there's no way to like not kind of predict that it would be AI. Now, everyone else here, just bear in mind that there are some character names. Nothing is official yet, so as it was with Screams 5 and 6, these names are subject to change. So the first one is Tatum, who is Sidney's daughter. This is played by Isabel May, and I am thinking that she is going to survive. That would be my gut instinct here. It just would feel like a huge gut punch to Sidney to kill off her daughter. Now, that's not to say that it's out of the realm of possibilities, but I'm getting the sense that this is going to be another safe movie. I'm just gonna put it out there. With this new era of Scream, it leans more into the comedy than the actual horror, and I'm not trying to say this as a criticism. This is just a predictions video, so I'm just going by my instinct and just based on what we've seen already. I'm sure there's going to be some rough and tumble with her and Sidney and all these people who survived, but ultimately I can't see them killing off Sidney's daughter. Like, we've run the gamut with Sidney, just in terms of like everywhere where she's been in life, the going into hiding, the depression, all of that stuff. And I just feel that like putting her in that dark place again, whether this is the last movie or there's going to be more moving forward and she's going to be back, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see like movies about trauma. So I'm hoping that this character survives just for Sidney's sake. Aren't I so polite? I mean, I'll just state it now. Like, it was low-key a criticism. I do feel that these movies have played it a little too safe, but everything with Tatum, pretty much turned out how I thought it would. Like, it talked about the possibility that she could die, and I just never first saw that with Sidney, and I think that, her being Ghostface would just be too akin to Jill turning out to be the killer in Scream 4. So, this all seemed to be pretty telegraphed. The next one, his name is Ben. This is Tatum's boyfriend. Now, apparently, based on the little bits that I've read, is that Sidney does not trust this character. That could be a red flag because Sidney's instincts are usually very on point with things. But the question is, does she already have a relationship with him where she doesn't trust him, or does she just stop trusting him once the murders start? That's the question here. Because if she's just never really liked this kid, that's one thing. But if she thinks that he's the killer, then she might be right. I mean, as cliche as it has been for the boyfriend to turn out to be the killer, I can see it happening again. I feel that there's going to be a little bit more nuance with that, and I'll get to that as I go through these next few characters, but I'm going to say that he is going to be one of the Ghostface killers. Yeah, I never seem to get the killers right, or whatever my main prediction is, because I think that I had multiple theories on who the killers were here. And, with Ben, I think that the question was presented. It was just does Sidney already not trust this kid, or is this something that comes about afterwards? And, for whatever reason, I guess they chose to make him crawling into her window and reciting lines from Stab and all of that. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, Ben did not turn out to be the killer. Now, the next character we have is Chloe. I am going to say that she's also going to be a Ghostface. In fact, I have 3 theories who the killers are altogether. In these 3 scenarios, she is the killer in 2 of them. I guess she's the best friend to Tatum, or Sidney's daughter. So I'm just seeing some sort of level of betrayal there, but I'm thinking that it's going to be her, and then also this character named Hannah, who's played by McKenna Grace, that she's going to be a Ghostface killer as well. And then that brings us to Lucas, is that his name? And I'm gonna say that he is also a Ghostface killer. And this is going to be my theory. I think these are all the Ghostface killers. There's going to be 4 of them, and they're working as a team. This is going to be a scenario sort of based on this thrown away storyline from Scream 3, if Kevin Williamson had initially written it, which was kind of like a cult of Ghostface killers. I think that they're going to be AI-obsessed kids and Stu-obsessed kids, and that's literally what we're going to see. That section of the fandom who thinks that Stu is still alive and pushes that narrative, that is going to be who the killers are in this scenario. And I don't know if that necessarily means that they think that he's alive, but they're going to at least be pushing that in terms of this AI. I also think this gives a lot of opportunity to do what Kevin Williamson wanted to do, which was kind of do all these fake out deaths and then have them kind of rise up at the end and surprise our protagonists. So in that case, with 4 of them running around, they can really kind of throw in that misdirection of who is the killer, because at any given point, they can all seem like unsuspecting victims and then get picked off one by one. Okay, wrong. Wow. I'm so curious. This turned out to be what happened. I don't know. Would this have been better? Would this have been worse? On one hand, I'm tired of seeing teenage Ghostface killers. It just seems like we've gotten that all the last 3 movies, at least, before this one. But I don't know. Let me know. Would you have rather, we got the killers we did, or if it was a combination of these 4 and Kevin Williamson got to have his original Scream 3 idea? At the very least, I got the prediction of the fact that they were going to be trying to make it seem like Stu was alive. And this is something that, already felt very disconnected from whatever Jessica's plot was in this movie. It was just sort of incidental, which was obviously just thrown in there as fan service. But that's why I feel like I'm so off on these predictions, because so much of it is predicated on fan service and nostalgia baiting. But 4 killers would not have been, too excessive. I mean, there technically was 4 in Scream 6, so, it would have just been the natural progression of that. It just seems like they keep adding more Ghostface killers each time. The second theory that I have is that the killers are just Chloe and Hannah. Scream 5 and 6 has kind of been about gimmicks and doing the things that have not been done yet. Like, let's have a opening scene victim who survives, or let's have the killer revealed in the opening scene and then get killed off. And then let's have 3 killers or 4. So in this case, if it was just the 2 of them, it would be kind of like filling this quota of just like having 2 female killers at the same time. And I think that if we do go that route, it would sort of be like an homage to Billy and Stu, but the female versions of that. So that's my theory number 2. But obviously the first one is that the 4 of these guys are Ghostface killers. You know what? Like, I actually think that I would have preferred that. I think I would have preferred the 2 female killers. Totally forgot about that theory. This is something that we haven't seen. I still want to see it. I want to see the female version of Billy and Stu. Maybe we'll get that with Scream 8. That's kind of my wishful thinking at this point. It just feels more interesting than what we did end up getting here. So because of that, I'm going to say that Mark Evans, who's played by Joel McHale, who is Sidney's husband, he is not a Ghostface killer. Patrick Dempsey was in consideration to come back and play the character of Mark, and that was always the plan, and that was the idea with Scream 5, with announcing that Sidney had married Mark, but just because of scheduling conflicts or contracts or whatever, he declined to do it. So for that reason, I don't think that there would have been like this major rewrite, but if a surviving character from the past came back, I just couldn't see them being Ghostface. And if this was meant to be Mark Kincaid from Scream 3, I just couldn't see him suddenly being the killer. Like, that kind of undermines Sidney's intellect as well, that she would get married to someone who is just untrustworthy. So with it in mind that Patrick Dempsey's character was always supposed to be this character, I think that they would just sort of carry over all of the elements to that, and he wouldn't be the killer. But I don't think he's going to survive either. And I think that that's probably going to be one of the big upsets for Sidney, because I feel that that will probably be easier for her to deal with than her daughter being killed. Wow, I'm doing really bad here, guys. I knew that I wouldn't have pegged him as the killer, but I forgot if I had him under Survive or Die. But, you know, clearly not doing too well. Not doing too well at all. Next up, we have a character named Jessica. This is supposed to be Sidney's neighbor and friend or best friend. Now, I personally think that Anna Camp, or Jessica in this case, being the killer would be very predictable. I think that she's going to be a huge red herring. Her and her son, which is Lucas. And the thing is, like, if she were to be Ghostface, let's just put her up here for a second, none of these guys are going to be the killer. Would that mean that her son is the killer as well? Because I can't see a scenario where she is the killer and her son isn't. Like, that would be pretty dark if she was, and maybe like he was a victim, or potentially she doesn't intend for him to be the victim, but he is killed off anyway, and she sort of like takes that out on Sidney or whatever. I think it would be more likely that they would be working together. And the thing with that is that we just came from a Scream movie where we saw a parent working with their children as Ghostface killers. So it just feels like it would be very repetitive. Also, I'm not too sure about this character, who I'll get to in a second, but I mean, like, it's possible that he could be her husband and they're just like a family unit that are killing together. But I am going to hold fast to the theory that it's going to be these 4 altogether, which, you know, makes me think that Jessica is going to be a character that dies. She'll be a major red herring, but she will die. It's like, I can see scenarios where like a child will kill their parent, and we've seen that in the past, obviously, with Roman and Maureen, but I can't see the reversal of that. There's just something a little too perverse about that I don't think that the Scream franchise would do that. If they did, kudos to them, but I'm just not seeing it happen. You know, kudos, Scream franchise, because you pulled one over on me. Jessica killed her son, and you know, I literally talked about all the reasons why that wouldn't happen, and it happened. Because of like the Baileys in Scream 6, they probably thought like, well, let's change things up, and instead of having the child work with the parent, let's have the parent kill the child. And Wow. Also, like, somewhat included this character, I think his name at the time was Kyle, which turned out to be Marco, as, like, possibly her husband. And, interesting that they were the killers and the accomplices, but it had nothing to do with Lucas. I did say that Jessica was, like, almost, like, too obvious. And I said that she was going to be a major red herring, which she wasn't. I need to start, like, listening to myself when I say, like, this person is too obvious as a killer. They probably will be the killer, because I just feel like there's no subtlety with these movies anymore in terms of, like, the casting and the marketing. It just seemed way too easy for it to be Jessica, and I guess maybe I just didn't want it to be. But, here we are. So that brings us to this character played by Ethan Embry, whose name is Kyle. I really don't have any info or knowledge about who he is. That's why I just speculate, like, possibly he is Jessica's husband. At any rate, I think that he is going to die as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that there was so little information about him is because, like, he's in a total of one scene before he's revealed as the killer at the end. This movie, clearly went a different route in terms of its killers, because most of them were just non-entities throughout the whole thing. And I mean, the actor who played Carl is not even on this list. Like, that's how much of a side character he was in terms of, like, whenever all of the casting news came out, it kind of ruins the whole aspect of doing these prediction videos when one of the killers is not even present as an option. Now, next up we have Robbie Rivers, played by Mark Consuelos. And this, I believe, is like a rival of Gale, like another journalist or reporter that I think will factor in very heavily with Gale's storyline. I hope that Gale has a full-fledged storyline. One of my fears with Scream 7 is that it's going to kind of go the Scream 4 route, where there's just like an oversaturation of characters, that there's so many storylines that each one doesn't really get the proper time that it deserves. So, if this is the case, if we're doing a thing where it's just like there's a Sidney storyline and a Gale storyline, there will probably be a teenagers storyline as well. Either way, it's going to be very overloaded, but I think that this is going to be a character who obviously is not going to be Ghostface. He's not going to be an NPC. I think that he'll die. This movie needs to have a body count. We can't have a whole bunch of survivors. So I'm guessing that he will be a victim. Yeah, so, this movie had a lot of survivors, and not that he was a rival of Gale's, like there was, a little bit of contention there, just in terms of this small town reporter, wanting his big break. But this character probably could have been plucked out of the movie and it wouldn't have changed a single thing. In terms of what I was saying about the contrast to Scream 4, I guess the idea here was that there was a Sidney storyline and that there was a Tatum storyline. So Gale was more so just a side character in Sidney's part of the story, so she didn't really get that opportunity to really have any sort of relations with a lot of the characters, as she was, mostly just kind of sidled next to Sidney for, any time that she was on screen. The next two characters, there's no names that I could find. The actors are Jimmy Tatro and Michelle Randolph. They were kind of announced separate from everybody else, like after the fact, which leads me to believe they might be the opening scene victims. I don't know how old, like most of this young cast, like they're in their mid-20s, and I think that these two are around the same age, like maybe like early 30s as well, but I can see a scenario where they're just hiring late 20s and 30-year-olds to play high school students. They're kind of giving me like a Casey and Steve vibe in a way, so I'm just gonna put them in die. Yeah, in terms of Scott and Madison, which I didn't have their character names at that point, it does feel like just within the last, especially with Scream 6, it's just like anyone who is announced after the fact, it's usually the opening scene victims. I don't know if that's because maybe they filmed the opening scene last, like they saved it for the end of production, or maybe they just chose not to announce them until later. But just because they were announced separate from everyone else and together, it just seemed very obvious that they were going to be the opening scene. These next two are also unnamed characters. The actors are Amy Louise Pemberton and Victor Turpin, and apparently they're going to be deputies. Also, I should have mentioned that Mark Evans is the sheriff of whatever town they live in. They're not in Woodsboro, so these are his deputies. I think that they're for sure going to be NPCs, and the reason for that is because, you know, based on Scream 5, like the deputies in that movie were non-characters. In Scream 6, there were so many NPCs, like all of the victims of that movie were technically NPCs. And just for clarity, if we're going back to Scream 2, I'd say that Officer Andrews and Officer Richards are also NPCs, but they did die. So I'm not saying that an NPC character doesn't belong in the die category as well, so I'll probably put them here, but I don't think that they're going to be actual characters in that regard. Whereas this guy, who's listed as Neighbor, played by Scott Allen Frederick, you know, I can just see like he's an NPC, and he probably won't factor into the story very much at all. Oh my gosh, it's so close. Obviously, I mean, these two were NPCs, Deputy Meadows and Deputy Cook, and they didn't die. They should have. That would have explained the absence of any sort of police force towards the end of the movie. But yeah, this was really wishful thinking. And I'm just looking at this here so far. So in the die category, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then inevitably the Ghostface killers would probably also die. So that would be 10, 11, 12, 13. And I mean, I think there was 13 kills in Scream 6. A lot of those were NPCs, as I had said, but that's a lot for a Scream movie as it is. And, you know, maybe I just had the bloodlust, you know, like I said, wishful thinking. I just wanted this movie to have more kills, and it didn't. So sadly, I can't take the points for those. In terms of this Neighbor character, I don't even remember seeing him. I'm sure that maybe he was there somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone, you know, correct me if, you know, he did play a different person in the movie. I guess I'll accept the point for that, but I literally think that maybe his scenes got cut. I don't know. That brings us to George, played by Timothy Simons, who is apparently the high school drama teacher. The thing is, like, he is not listed on IMDb. This comes from Scream News on Twitter, so I don't know if this is absolutely true or not. I think that it's kind of suspect that he's not listed on IMDb, like this is just some sort of like fan casting. Timothy Simons, I only know him from the show Veep. Now, because he is a more well-known actor, I think that he's not going to be an NPC if he is an actual character in this movie. But I'm wondering if he is sort of like the high school drama teacher, and like apparently there's this storyline where they're putting on some school play. Could there be a chance that he is the killer, or like the mentor to these kids and like part of the Stu fascination and the AI thing? But the thing is, it's just like, I don't know if this is actually a character in the movie, and maybe they're keeping it under wraps because he is the killer and they don't want to like publicize that he's in it. I think that he is going to die, but I could see a possibility, like if this is a character in the movie, you know, he could be a Ghostface, and there could be like all 5 of these, and maybe he's the link to Stu that everyone is talking about. Like, you know, like people are saying that Jessica is related to Stu, like she's Leslie Macher, and they're going to be another scenario where the past killer's relatives are coming after them. Like, again, we just did that in Scream 6, and it was done in Scream 2. And I think as well, like, how would Sidney not remember Leslie Macher? That's the thing. Sidney grew up in this small town of Woodsboro with all these people who were her friends. Even if she wasn't that close to Stu, there's got to be a level afterwards, knowing who the family is. Even if she didn't recognize her, Sidney is going to be the type of character who looks into people's backgrounds. So if like this is her neighbor and best friend, she's gonna like find out everything, like past criminal records, all that stuff. Because if she doesn't, it's gonna make her look foolish, like it did with Kirby and Gale in Scream 6 for not knowing that Detective Bailey was Richie's father. So I can't see a familial connection with Stu. This guy, you know, if he is a character or not, he could could be the ringleader of all these guys, but he might not even be a character in the movie because it's not on IMDb. That's how little I know at the moment. But let's just say he's going to die if he is one. And if he isn't, you know, I didn't predict it 100%, but I'll just say that I put it out there. Yeah, this guy turned out to be, you know, like, I don't even know what he was. He essentially exited the movie after the first act. He was just sort of linked to this terrible school play where he told Tatum that she didn't have her mother's fire, you know, to play this stuffed dog. He was clearly no Professor Gus that we saw in Scream 2. He's just kind of a schmuck, but he didn't turn out to be a killer. He didn't turn out to be the mentor of any other killers. He didn't die. He wasn't, you know, I mean, I guess he's kind of an NPC. That feels like it would be the most appropriate category to put him in, because it wasn't like he survived an attack or anything. His life was never in danger. So let's see, how did I do here? I got 10 out of 22 right, which is less than 50%. This is a failing grade. For some reason, this was a very hard movie for me to predict. And, you know, in a way, I am happy that, you know, the movie could at least surprise me, but I'm just not sure if it was the right kind of surprise that I wanted. I want to thank my Patreon supporters, Alex Myers, Trey Jefferson, and Eric Serrano. If you want to see even more Scream-related content, you can click over on one of these playlists over here. Until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.